50 people. That's how many emergency rescues happened in a single New Jersey town during one night when Hurricane Erin proved that staying offshore doesn't mean staying safe. Hurricane Erin becomes the first Atlantic hurricane of 2025. This hurricane doesn't need to make landfall to turn quiet Back Bay neighborhoods into aquatic nightmare zones.
Well, how about this? Of course, the big news this week was Hurricane Erin, right? It caused major flooding across coastal New Jersey earlier this week. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy actually declared a state of emergency on Thursday for all 21 counties. Included in that was the town of Margate City.
Erin's massive circulation created life-threatening flooding hundreds of miles from its eye, trapping residents in cars, restaurants, and homes that had never flooded before. Welcome to Earth's Dark Secrets. I'm about to reveal how Hurricane Erin achieved widespread destruction while staying completely offshore, and why the most dangerous place during this storm wasn't on the beach, but trapped in your car on a suburban street that had been bone dry just hours earlier. Erin earned its place in hurricane history, not just as 2025's inaugural Atlantic hurricane, but for briefly achieving Category 5 intensity on August 15th, before fluctuating between Categories 2 and 3 as it tracked up the eastern seaboard. Despite never making landfall, Erin maintained a destructive influence across a geographic footprint that spanned 9 U.S. states simultaneously. The storm created what meteorologists now call remote impact flooding, delivering serious coastal inundation from Maryland to Maine while its eye remained safely offshore. What's terrifying wasn't Erin's peak intensity, but its sustained circulation persistence. The hurricane maintained tropical storm force winds extending over 400 miles from its center, creating a zone of destruction larger than the entire state of Texas. The storm's approach coincided perfectly with astronomical high tides, creating a compound flooding scenario that transformed routine tidal cycles into emergency evacuation triggers. Thursday evening, August 22nd, high tide scheduled for 7:43 p.m. Fire Chief Dan Adams watched his department's capabilities stretched beyond breaking point as what started as routine Back Bay flooding escalated into New Jersey's largest single-evening water rescue operation in recent memory. More than 50 people required emergency extraction from vehicles, restaurants, and bars as floodwater rose faster than anyone had experienced in this coastal community. 2 restaurants along Amherst Avenue near the Back Bay became impromptu survival shelters when customers discovered rising water had eliminated their escape routes. Among the 16 people and 3 dogs rescued from 6 submerged vehicles, one trapped a mother with her 3-month-old baby, while another victim couldn't force their car door open against the water pressure that had accumulated in minutes. Erin triggered minor to moderate coastal flooding across an unprecedented geographic range.
The storm's impact still being felt at this late hour. Erin brought rough surf from the Jersey Shore to Long Island, and you can see that Coast Guard boat there riding those big waves in Manasquan earlier today.
Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. Nearly 1,000 miles of simultaneous emergency conditions. In Maryland, Assateague Island National Seashore experienced what park officials described as complete dune system failure. Protective sand barriers that had withstood decades of storms were breached and redistributed, burying parking areas under 5 feet of displaced sand while eliminating natural flood protection for inland communities. Ocean City implemented comprehensive beach closures as forecasters documented dangerous surf conditions, rip current formation, and progressive beach erosion that threatened waterfront infrastructure. Emergency teams deployed sand redistribution equipment and dune stabilization measures to prevent further erosion in vulnerable coastal zones. In North Carolina, more than 70 people required rescue from rip currents before Erin reached its closest approach. Just to give you an idea, the storm generated life-threatening ocean conditions days before its peak regional impact. Queens and Long Island experienced flooding that revealed critical weaknesses in urban drainage systems that most residents never knew existed. Coastal flooding inundated streets in Howard Beach and Far Rockaway, with Freeport and Jones Beach experiencing significant tidal surge near high tide cycles. The timing created what oceanographers call tidal amplification cascade. Erin's offshore circulation synchronized with natural high tide cycles, transforming normal drainage infrastructure into reverse flow systems that pumped ocean water directly into residential areas instead of channeling street runoff toward the sea. Local emergency services documented something they'd never encountered: flood conditions that persisted through multiple tidal cycles, meaning areas that typically dried out between high tides remained inundated for extended periods. This simply created evacuation challenges that traditional flood response protocols hadn't anticipated.
To Hurricane Erin battering the East Coast with waves and rip currents. The dangerous conditions are expected to last throughout the weekend.
Erin's development pattern shows the new reality of Atlantic hurricane formation. Explosive intensification cycles create major hurricanes with minimal advance warning. The storm achieved Category 5 strength while moving through exceptionally warm Atlantic waters and low wind shear conditions that created an optimal development environment. Meteorologists tracking Erin documented pressure drops and wind speed increases that occurred faster than historical Atlantic storms, drawing energy from ocean temperatures that exceeded seasonal averages. At its peak intensity, Erin generated wave heights approaching 35 to 40 feet in open ocean conditions, while coastal areas experienced breakers reaching 15 to 20 feet, sufficient to overtop most seawalls and flood barriers designed for historical storm parameters. Of course, Erin created systematic transportation network failures that demonstrated modern society's vulnerability to coastal storm systems. Highway connections linking barrier islands faced closure due to flooding and erosion damage, effectively isolating coastal communities that depend on these routes for evacuation and essential supply delivery. Ferry services connecting island communities to mainland areas suspended operations as Erin's wave conditions made safe harbor operations impossible. 8 days after Erin's closest approach, coastal communities were discovering damage patterns that remained invisible during the storm's passage. Power restoration teams worked continuously for 96+ hours, but Erin's sustained wind conditions had created delayed failure sequences, electrical grid components that appeared functional during the storm but collapsed under accumulated stress days later. Unlike typical hurricane damage where infrastructure fails immediately, Erin created slow-motion system breakdowns that continued long after weather conditions returned to normal. Beach communities discovered that sand dunes and natural barriers had been eroded or breached, leaving previously protected neighborhoods exposed to future storm surge with significantly reduced natural defenses. Erin challenges fundamental assumptions about hurricane threat assessment and coastal vulnerability planning. Traditional hurricane preparedness models focus on direct impact zones, areas where a storm's eye crosses the coastline. Erin showed this approach's dangerous inadequacy by achieving maximum destruction while remaining entirely offshore, creating simultaneous emergency situations across multiple states that overwhelmed conventional disaster response coordination. The storm maintained destructive wave action and flooding capability across a geographic area larger than many entire countries, generating what oceanographers term long-distance energy transfer. Wave and surge conditions that maintained dangerous intensity across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Weather modeling systems struggled to predict Erin's flooding impacts because the storm operated outside historical precedent, creating coastal flood conditions in areas that had never experienced hurricane-related inundation, even from direct hit storms of comparable intensity. Despite widespread destruction and flooding emergencies, the most remarkable aspect of Erin's rampage was the coordination of massive rescue operations with zero storm-related fatalities reported along the U.S. East Coast. Extraordinary emergency management success, coordinating water rescues, evacuations, and medical responses across 9 states simultaneously while managing a disaster scenario with no historical playbook for guidance. The 50+ rescues in Margate City alone required coordination between fire departments, Coast Guard units, and civilian volunteers operating in flood conditions that made conventional emergency vehicle access impossible. Rescue teams used everything from specialized storm response trucks to commandeered private boats to extract trapped residents during peak flooding hours. Hurricane Erin's 2025 Atlantic debut revealed something coastal authorities prefer not to acknowledge: Our infrastructure and emergency systems remain fundamentally unprepared for storms that operate outside historical precedent. Erin proved that distance from a hurricane center provides no safety guarantee when dealing with modern Atlantic storm systems enhanced by warmer ocean temperatures and evolving circulation patterns. Of course, the storm's ability to maintain major hurricane intensity while remaining offshore, combined with its multi-state impact footprint, is a new category of Atlantic threat. It directly challenges every assumption about coastal safety and hurricane risk assessment. As hurricane seasons transition from historical patterns to unpredictable intensity cycles, coastal communities from Florida to Maine face an uncomfortable reality. The next offshore hurricane might not stay offshore, and the next direct hit might be far more destructive than anything Erin demonstrated. Thanks for watching Earth's Dark Secrets, where we expose the hidden realities behind our planet's most devastating disasters. If this investigation revealed something the mainstream media won't tell you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the stories that authorities don't want told. Hit the bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the disasters that reveal our planet's dark truths.